Okay, I'm going to review counting Sig Figs in case you need the review or you weren't in class. So again, Sig Figs are essentially the numbers in an answer that matter. So there are some simple rules to follow to determine which digits matter and what do you count. So, basics. Let's look at these numbers right here. So obviously if it's not a 0, it has to count. Any non-zero number counts. But if there are zeros in the middle, they have to count. You can't, in this example here, you cannot ignore that 0 in the middle and only say 3 sig figs. So any zeros in the middle count. So that answer has 4 sig figs. If you look at the next one, you have 2 zeros stuck in the middle between a 3 and a 2. Again, you have to count them. You can't just say 2 sig figs because you see a 3 and a 2. So this one also has 4 sig figs. So that's the first simple rule. Also, if you look down here at this one, there's 3 zeros stuck in the middle. It does not matter if there's a decimal or a comma. If there's zeros in the middle, they have to count. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sig figs. That's it. That's all there is to with zeros in the middle. Now, here's the trickier part, but actually not really. Zeros to the left do not count. So left, no, they don't count. So even all these zeros here do not count. I don't care that there's a decimal. And I hope you realize by me saying left, they are to the left of this 5 and 6, which are non-zero numbers. We have to count the 5 and 6. But zeros to the left of a non-zero number do not count. I don't care if there's a decimal. It doesn't matter. They don't count. Very simple. Keep it easy. On the next one, I see these non-zero numbers and a 0 in the middle. But again, these two are to the left. They do not count. So if you count what I have underlined, you will see that there are only 4 sig figs. And then finally, on the last one, all I see is a 9. All these zeros to the left, again, do not count, and this is only 1 sig fig. So very simple, zeros to the left do not count. All right, now, here's where it gets a little bit trickier, but still, I'm going to simplify it for you, hopefully, and keep it easy. Zeros to the right are a yes, only if there's a decimal somewhere in the number. There needs to be a decimal point. So in this first one here, is there a decimal? Yes. Are these zeros to the right? Yes. So these zeros count, and that's why this answer is 4. The next example, these zeros are to the right of the 5, and there's a decimal right there. So automatically, all 3 of those zeros count. So there are 5 sig figs in that answer. And the next one, is there a decimal? Yes. Are they to the right? Yep. So they have to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sig figs. All right. So again, just ask yourself, is there a decimal? If the answer is yes, and they are to the right, you have to count them. Now, on the next one, you will see there's a decimal at the end. But again, following my simple questions, is there a decimal? Yes, right there. Are these zeros to the right? Yes, they are. So therefore, they count, and that's why the answer is 4 sig figs. But if you look at the one below it, is there a decimal in that number? No. Technically, you'd see people write it maybe with a comma there, but there's no decimal in that number. And so therefore, those zeros do not count because there's no decimal. There has to be a decimal point. So there's only 2 sig figs in that. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, what's the point of that? Well, What they're trying to do, and why scientists came up with this, is because whatever measuring tool was used here in this one, they need this last zero to count as a sig fig, so they put a decimal there to make it count. But in this example, they only need the first 2 digits to count, so they don't put the decimal. That decimal point is very important when it comes to counting sig figs. Okay, so let's look at these. All right, so following the simple basics again. Is there a decimal in this number, this first one here? Yes, it's right there. But these zeros are to the left, right? So I'm going to cross them out. They don't count. But this 0 is to the right. So that one's going to count. And then this one has 3 sig figs. In the next example, do you see a decimal point? Nope. Okay, so then these zeros to the right do not count. So 1, 2, 3, 4 sig figs. That's it. Now, scientific notation. Scientific notation, as we've already gone over, just eliminates excess zeros. So here's the easy way to do scientific notation. You are going to essentially ignore the times 10 to the, because that is what got rid of the excess zeros, if that makes sense. So you just look at this number for all scientific notation numbers. You just look at that and count sig figs. And you can see that that is 2 sig figs. And that's it. That's how you do scientific notation. It's that easy. Okay? Now, I have one more. Oh no, I have a couple more. I forgot. Let's do these first. No. Yeah, we'll do these, sorry. I had to think what order I wanted to do things in. All right. Is there a decimal in this first number? Yeah, it's right there. But these zeros are to the left, so I'm not going to count them. But this 0 is going to have to count because there's a decimal and it's to the right. So there are 3 sig figs. Again, the whole point of that last 0 is whatever measuring tool they used went all the way down to that many decimal places, and they want that 0 to count. Maybe that's the estimation number, but still it has to count. And so there are 3 sig figs in that answer. The next number, is there a decimal point? Yep, it's right there. These zeros are to the right, but there's a decimal point. So again, as long as there is a decimal point, those zeros count. And so this one has 5 sig figs. And the next one, scientific notation. Again, I'm just going to totally ignore that. If I look at this number, how many sig figs? It has 4, right? You have to count the 0 in the middle. So the last example I have is, what if you see a scientific notation number like this? Well, again, I'm going to ignore that, right? If I look at this number, does that 0 on the end count? Well, ask yourself, is there a decimal? Yes. Are they to the right? Yes. So that 0 counts. So there are 3 sig figs in that number. So again, very simple. Zeros to the left do not count. Zeros to the right count if there's a decimal point somewhere in the number. And that's it. That is all there is to counting sig figs. I hope that helped.